Hi guys, it's Lindsay. Welcome back to The Wandering Reader. Today I'm going to be starting a new series on my channel called Book Wishlist. So I got this idea from Karen over at Rather Be Reading. I've been subscribed to her channel for a few months now and we've sort of started chatting to each other in the comments of our videos. Her channel is absolutely fantastic, so if you haven't checked it out, please go and subscribe and watch some of her videos because she is great. She does this series on her channel called Marked as To Read. It's like a monthly series, and what she talks about are books that she's added to her want to read list on Goodreads for that particular month. So I'm going to do something similar, but I've called it Book Wishlist. So this is my November book wish list. Because what I do on Goodreads is my want to read list are all of the books that I actually own in a physical copy. I haven't put Kindle books on there, and I suppose I should really, but I haven't. So physical books that I own that I haven't read yet. And I really wanted to make a distinction between that and ones that I don't. So what I do is I use my Amazon wish list to add books in there that I don't own that I would like to read, or that I'll get out from the library at some point later on. So I'm going to make this like a mid-month video that I do. So all the books that I'm going to talk to you about today are ones that I added to my wish list between October the 16th and November the 16th. So yeah, let's just get going, because there are, scrolling through my wish list, there are quite a few I have added. The first bit that I want to talk about is called Under a Pole Star, and this is by Steph Penny, and she's the same writer that wrote The Tenderness of Wolves, which I talked about on my channel when I did a try a chapter tag, which was quite a few months ago now. That sat on my shelf for years and years and I haven't read it, but I've always been intrigued to do so. The first thing that intrigued me about this book is that it's on this year's, or this bit of the year's, Richard and Judy's book club book, which is like a list of books that Richard and Judy put together, and they're like TV presenters in the UK, or they were, and W.H. Smith kind of do this book club, I think twice a year, or it could be yearly, and I've read quite a few things off of this list before and always been quite impressed with what they've chosen. So that was kind of the first reason that I decided to add it to my wish list, along with the fact that it's by Steph Penny, and I don't think she's released anything since The Tenderness of Wolves. I could be wrong about that, but I don't think she has, so that kind of intrigued me as well. And then the storyline sounds really, really good. So it sounds like it's got like a historical kind of backdrop to it, and there are two characters, a woman and a man, who are on rival expeditions to the North Pole, and their kind of expeditions meet, and there's lots of tension about who's going to reach the pole first and that sort of thing. And then I think there's some sort of a romance between the two main characters, and then one of them goes up to the North Pole and it says there are devastating results. So that kind of sounds really intriguing. I'm not really one to read non-fiction about expeditions. That doesn't really appeal to me that much, but I think the backdrop of this will be quite interesting to read about, and the romance between the two main characters and that sort of thing. Yeah, I think that would be quite interesting to read. So the next book that I want to talk about is called Rose of Sarajevo, and this is by Ice Kulin. I think that's how you pronounce that. I've probably completely butchered it. This is a historical fiction novel. I want to say Krista from Books and Jams hauled on her channel recently. I could be wrong about that, but I think that's why this is on this list. And this sounded really interesting because it was about a female journalist, and some sort of political intrigue, and set against the backdrop of the 1990s in the Balkans, and all of those things sounded really, really interesting. And this author also wrote The Last Train to Istanbul, which I know has received lots of praise, so yeah, it interested me for that reason. The next book that I want to talk about is called The Cottingley Secret, and this is by Hazel Gaynor, and this is a book that is about fairies. So it's historical fiction, and it's set in two different time periods. A time period where I think two girls take some photographs of what they claim to be fairies, and then it says that Sir Arthur Conan Doyle He authenticates the photographs, I think, and then it switches to a more modern timeline when these photographs are discovered. This really intrigued me because I think, and I can't remember the name of the film now, but I think there was a film that came out when I was younger about this exact topic. And it really kind of captured my interest. I remember my sister really liking it as well. So I thought it would be intriguing to read a book kind of along those lines and see whether it had similarities to the film that I watched. But I was just intrigued by it for that reason. Next up, I put on the list Killers of the Flower Moon, Oil, Money, Murder and the Birth of the FBI, and this is by David Gran. And I put this on my wish list after watching lots of people's non-fiction November TBRs, and there are a couple of booktubers that I watch who put this on their TBR for the month, and it just sounded like it was going to be really interesting. So this is exactly what it said. It's about the birth of the FBI, and I think we're going to get some sort of ideas about the corruption perhaps within the FBI. Yeah, I don't really know, but that sounds really interesting to me. The next book that I've got on my list is called The Duchess Deal, and this is by Tessa Dare. I've heard of a couple of people speak about this, and actually most recently Karen from Rather Be Reading. She, I think, has read all the books in this series now, and has talked about how they're really enjoyable. These are Regency romances. So there's kind of lots of romance and sexy time in them, but they're set against the backdrop of the Regency era. So I've also heard Kirsty from Ravenclaw Reading Room, although she's not on YouTube anymore, talk about how she really enjoyed them as well. So I thought I would give them a go and add them to my wish list. Next up, I want to talk about two books by Mariah Hornbacher, I think that's how you pronounce that. They're called Madness and Wasted, and both of these books I saw recommended by Jen over at Jen Campbell, and she did a video where she talked about lots of non-fiction recommendations, and you'll see a pattern because I've got loads of them on my wish list here. These, Madness is, I believe, about the author's struggle with being bipolar, and Wasted is, well, the subtitle is A Memoir of Anorexia and Bulimia. So I think both of these will be really intriguing. I love reading about kind of topics that I don't know a lot about. So mental health and kind of mental health issues are definitely something, topics that I don't know enough about and that I want to read a lot more by. And Jen said that these were really well written and really interesting, and that she learned a lot from them, so I added them to my wish list. Next up, I want to talk about another non-fiction book called Ghosts of the Tsunami, Death and Life in Japan's Disaster Zone by Jonathan Cape. And this is about the tsunami that hit the coast of Japan in 2011, I think, and sort of the consequences of that for people that live there. And I believe the author was living there for 6 years in the aftermath of that tsunami and kind of was experiencing what life was like there. And again, that sounds really interesting, and Jen recommended that one too. Next up, I want to talk about a book called Seeing Red, and this is by Lena Maroon. Again, this is a book that was recommended by Jen. This is about a woman who goes blind. So she recounts her experience of that happening to her, and then how her life changed as a result of that. I cannot imagine what it would be like to lose one of your senses like that, and eyesight being such a crucial one. So I think it's going to be really interesting reading about, you know, the consequences of that and how she dealt with that in her life and things like that. Yeah, this is going to be a really important one. Next up, I want to talk about a book called I'd Rather Be Reading, A Library of Art for Book Lovers by Genevieve Delamere, and I heard about this book on Mary's channel from Happily Ever Esh. And she read this as part of her non-fiction November reads, and it was kind of like a little tiny book, and it was almost like a coffee table book, but it had lots of different texts in there that were all to do with reading and the joy of reading. And I mean, you know, how that wouldn't appeal to you, I don't know, so I had to add that to my wish list. Next up, I want to talk about Tuesday Nights in 1980 by Molly Prentice. This book was recommended by Olive over at A Book Olive, and pretty much anything that she recommends I put on my wish list straight away. So this is a book set in 1980s Manhattan, That appealed to me straight away because I absolutely love New York. I've been there twice now, would love to go back, and anything set in New York really intrigues me. Also set in the 1980s, which was the era in which I was born, so that interests me for that reason. And then it talks about the art scene in Manhattan, and it talks about some different characters in the art scene. And like I said, Olive really highly rated it, so anything that she rates highly I have to put on my wish list. Next up, I'd like to talk about If We Were Villains by M.L. Rio. And this is a book that has been compared to The Secret History by Donna Tartt. That's a book that I haven't read and I don't actually own a copy of, but I've heard lots of people say good things about. This is about a guy who spent time in prison for murder, and when he gets out of prison he's greeted by the detective that helped to put him in prison, and the detective is kind of retiring, and he asked him, can you tell me the truth of what happened on that night? And so this guy, they sit down together and they talk about what happened, and yeah, that on its own is really intriguing, but then it seems to be set, like the murder itself, in some sort of, the backdrop of a play that they're putting on in school, and then somebody dies in the course of the play, and they all of the actors put on a show to pretend it's not them, or something along those lines. So yeah, I was really intrigued by that premise. I think it's going to be quite a dark read, and if they're comparing it to a Donna Tartt book, I think that's only a good thing. I've only read The Goldfinch by her, but I think she's a great writer, and I can't wait to read other stuff by her. So I mean, by making that comparison, I think it's going to be good. Next up, I want to talk about Daughters of the Witching Hill, and this is by Mary Sherratt. This was another recommendation from Olive over at a Book Olive. It was a book that she read during October, sort of around Halloween time. And it's a book about witches, not set against the backdrop, I believe, of the sort of Salem witch trials, but in a different kind of era. Historical fiction, kind of full of intrigue and revelation, and she said it was a really good book on witches, so I give that one a go. Another book that Olive recommended was The Genius of Birds by Jennifer Ackerman. This is a non-fiction book all about different facts and studies about birds that the author has researched, and she went to visit lots of different laboratories across the world and things like that. Olive's got a bit of an obsession with birds at the moment, and she said this was really interesting and that she learned a lot from it. So yeah, I'll give that one a go. The next book that I want to talk about is called The Lifeboat, and this is by Charlotte Rogan. And this seems to be about a ocean liner sinking, and then a group of people who survived the sinking being in this lifeboat, and the conversations that kind of happen in this lifeboat. And I think it's going to be sort of like a clash of class and culture at this particular time. So it has got a historical backdrop. Can't remember. Oh, it's 1914 and Europe is on the brink of war. So I think it's going to be quite interesting from that point of view to see the different characters on the lifeboat and how they interact with each other, and how they manage to survive in this really sort of terrible situation. So I added that one. Next up, I want to talk about The Shining Girls, and this is by Lauren Bukes, and I heard about this on Sarah's channel from Sarah's Nightstand. Again, I've recently subscribed to her channel and I've loved watching her videos, and she recently did a try a chapter tag on some books that she'd bought in Dollar Tree, which I suppose is the UK equivalent of something like Poundland or something like that. I could be wrong, but I'm kind of guessing. So she read a chapter from 4 of her books, and then she went ahead and read one of them and talked about how much she liked it. She said that this was a thriller, and the way that she described it reminded me a little bit of Dark Matter, which is kind of what intrigued me about it to begin with. She said it was about a time-travelling serial killer And one day he attacks this girl and he thinks that she's dead, but it turns out that she's not. So she then hears, I think, about, she's trying to figure out who attacked her, and I think she tries to go after him. So that sounded really, really good, and Sarah had nothing but praise to say about it, so I think that's going to be a good thriller to pick up. Then the last book that I want to talk about is called Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas by Hunter S. Thompson, and I heard about this book on the channel Chapter 32. I can't remember her name, but if I remember I'll put it on here on the screen. But she did a video talking about some of her non-fiction favourites, and she included this one, and I think this has been turned into a film, but I've never watched the film, I've never really heard anything about it before, but I think this seems to be about a couple of guys who are on the wrong track, shall we say, and it's sort of about the more gritty side of Las Vegas. So sort of part travel book, part memoir. I don't really know how to describe it, but it sounded really intriguing. So there we go, guys. They were all the books that I added to my wish list this month. A lot of non-fiction books in there, but it is non-fiction November, so that kind of makes sense. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you've read any of the books that I've mentioned, please leave me a comment down below. I'd love to have a chat with you. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye.